Good morning, Rich Cawthorn, Alpha Pension Group. This is the market recap for March 25th. This is something that we have always done at Alpha Pension Group, but now since we're adjusting and working from home, we thought we would publish this for the clients and anybody else that would like to see it. So with me here today is Rob Milas, our Chief Investment Officer, Jennifer Sahadi, our Director of Education, and Mark Salamone, our Lead Consultant. So Rob, I'll turn it over quickly to you to talk about what happened in the market yesterday and a little forecast for what you see today in the market.
Yeah, well, yesterday was a historic day in the market. In fact, the Dow Industrial Average surged the most since 1933 in terms of percentages. The S&P was up 10%, while the NASDAQ was up 8.4%. And all 11 sectors of the S&P 500 showed strong gain. In the market, the Treasury bonds slumped modestly, sending yields just modestly higher and steepening the yield curve, again, just to a modest extent. But we also are monitoring the international markets, and international equities rallied hard as well. So you had the Euro stocks index rally 9.24% yesterday. The Nikkei 225 was up 7.13%. On similar stimulus packages that are being passed globally. So we see Wall Street has begun to argue that liquidations are nearing an end, with real money investors like pension funds ready to step in. So on the positive side, at 2 o'clock in the morning, we received news that the stimulus package had finally passed through the U.S. Congress. And that package entails a $6 trillion stimulus package. And just to put that into perspective, the GDP of the third largest country in the world is 5.5 trillion, and that's of Japan. To also put it into perspective, it's more than 3 times larger than Canada's GDP, and Canada is the 10th largest GDP in the world. So the $6 trillion breaks down as $4 trillion of monetary stimulus and $2 trillion of fiscal stimulus.
Rob, you look pretty good for being up at 2 in the morning. That's my first comment. My second is, I know the details of that package are yet to be disclosed, but certainly some good news in the market, and hopefully this is some stimulus for the global economy. Anything that you see this morning? I think futures were all over the place. There's really no footing yet, right?
Yeah, no, so interestingly, all night, the futures were up nearly over 3% for most of the night. Just as I got on, they had come back to slightly negative. So to your point, it'll be interesting to see how the markets react today and whether they hold as people start to churn through what's actually in this package.
Great. So with all that volatility, I know as an investor, as a plan participant, you sort of have to have some guidance. So I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Sahadi to talk about our education presence and resources that we have for plan participants.
Thank you very much, Rich. A lot of people can find all of this data overwhelming. So we found this fantastic piece from Vanguard talking about some smart moves, some practical guidance that people can actually take right now. The first one is to try to turn out the noise. What this means is to really take perspective of what all those ups and downs means. Many people will look at their balance and think that that's a good indication of what their actual value is. And that's not the case. When you're looking at your balance in your retirement plan, that's only showing what your exact investments would be worth if you sold everything today. And that's a pretty unlikely situation. With retirement plans, you're normally taking out money slowly over time in many different market situations. So try to keep that in mind when you're thinking about the ups and downs of the market. If you are feeling nervous about all these ups and downs, it could be an indication that you need to revisit your asset allocation. Right? Bonds are up for the year, even though stocks are down. That's why we often try to have a mix of stocks and bonds, leaning more towards stocks when we have more years until retirement, so that we can wait out markets like this, and more bonds as we get closer to retirement. You can control what you can when it comes to cost. Now that you have time at home, you're on your computer a little bit more often, you can look at the expense ratios within the funds. You can always try to control the cost that way by looking for funds that have lower expense ratios. Remember to set your expectations reasonably. We do not expect markets to be up more than 30% as they were last year. We don't expect markets to be down 25% as they are currently. And finally, it's important to stay diversified right now. I know a lot of people might feel the urge to run for stocks if you're younger or run for bonds if you're older. But remember, having an appropriate mix is always the best thing you can do in any market.
Thanks so much. And I know you and your team have been working extra hard talking to all of our plan participants. As a reminder, we have webinars twice a week that anybody can join, whether you're a client or not a client of Alpha. You can reach out to us and get the details of those. So thanks again, Jennifer. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark Salamone, our lead consultant, to give us just a couple of bullet points of the headlines that have been going through the news cycle in the past 24 hours.
So no shortage of news yesterday for sure. So yesterday, as Rob reported, coronavirus cases were up past 50,000 in the U.S. and in New York alone, they're doubling every 3 days. So hopefully the peak is approaching soon. The White House is discussing social distancing guidelines ending actually sooner rather than later. This was talked about yesterday, met with a lot of resistance from a lot of areas. In fact, I think Dr. Fauci even said this would be based on data at the time, not necessarily drawing a line in the sand. And at the time, they talked about having Easter be the date where potentially they could relax the social distancing guidelines. So we'll see where that goes. The Tokyo Olympics for 2020 officially postponed. They're aiming for the summer of 2021, still going to have it in Tokyo, so that's good news for keeping it there. Unfortunate that we have to delay it. Last but not least, China has actually eased the lockdown on the Hubei province. So those from Wuhan who were not from there can now be allowed to leave. So a lot of folks that were stuck in Wuhan during the lockdown actually had to stay in Wuhan during that time. They're now allowed to go home. Last but not least, as Rob touched upon, the coronavirus aid, the CARES Act, which we talked about at length, was passed late last night. So we're interested in hearing the details on that.
Thanks, Mark. And of course, I know you're on top of the CARES Act. We're looking through the details. Once they're released, we'll have a special edition here to let everybody know the details of that. Not only what does it mean as just a consumer and as an American, but also how does it impact you as a plan participant and a business owner that offers a retirement plan. So that's it for March 25th. Thanks so much, and we'll see you tomorrow.